So if you've ever wanted to build a PC, I think now is a perfect time. If you're coming from the console platform and you've seen lately how Xbox basically is chasing the bag and PlayStation is also chasing the bag, I'm sure by now you can basically find yourself maybe somewhat disillusioned by things like these, where they're advertising that you need to come and buy or pre-order a refresh. The PS5 Pro is also coming, and even way back when they were talking about the rumors, I guess the PS5 Pro is still a rumor because it's not been officially announced, but you know, it's one of those things where PlayStation has traditionally brought a refresh, so I guess we can take it into account. That being said, I put together some sort of a price comparison to show how you can build a better PC for around the same cost that it will actually take to run a console. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say the exact cost of a console, because if we look at it from an apples to apples comparison, how much money is going to come out of your pocket on the first 24 hours that you pay for that console versus that PC, the PC will basically cost you about $100 to $150 more. However, when we look at the fine print, we start to see things like subscription services, which come into these consoles, as well as how long you'll be playing for these subscription services. In today's day and age, you pay about $120 a year to get PlayStation Plus, that's the base, or about $120 a year to get the core version of Xbox's own subscription service to be able to play most of your games online. If you did that for 2 years, that is up $240. If you did it at 3 years, that's $360. If you did it for 4 years, that is $480. Now, I left it at $120 because I know people are going to get discounts. There's usually all of those during Christmas. So I wanted to factor it in. I could put $250 and still be fine, but I left it at $120 just as a baseline. Keep in mind that this total is more than likely going to be favoring the $660 to $700 if you were actually taking it from that perspective. Now, the $40 that you see here is actually the premium cost on games. Ideally, if a game shows up on PC, it has sometimes, for the most part, a $10 price difference between its console counterparts. I remember very clearly, and I made a video on this, when my deluxe edition of Gotham Knights on PC costs way less than my standard edition by like almost $20 to $25. I remember going to trade in games to buy a console version of that game that actually ran at 30 FPS. I know I'm a Batman fan. I'm a huge, Bat family aficionado in many cases. And so I wanted to, for the community, I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And that was basically the last console game I paid for full price. And so in looking at that, you basically have to say, okay, there's about 4 games that you might be interested in every year. If you bought them at full price, you'd pay about $10 a piece. If I had to remove this cost, though, I'd have to basically add for the, subscription. So I'm given the benefit of the doubt in one area. All right, financial analysis out of the way, accounting out of the way. Let's now go shopping. So what do we need to do? We need to get, in my opinion, a device, a PC that can play majority of the games out here. On the PC side, the way we actually measure our devices is that we, number one, look at the kinds of games we like to play. Not only do we look at the games that we like to play, we look at the performance of those games that we like to play and look at what the demand is for those kinds of games. So for instance, somebody like me who enjoys third-person games, action games, and so on and so forth, I go to my Steam and I say, okay, for this kind of game, what kind of device would I need? So for instance, a game like, say, Sekiro. Sekiro will basically give me the PC specs that it wants me to have if I wanted to play the game. It's asking for some old hardware specs in this regard, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, let's go ahead and take a very close look at Sekiro, and I'll show you what it is that I mean. So here's Sekiro. It says, to play Sekiro, we recommend that you have an i3-2100 or an FX 6300. An FX 6300 is an old CPU, or a GTX 70. Well, easy enough. I can buy myself a 6750 XT. In fact, if we really wanted to say, well, how am I sure this is going to play a game that comes all the way down the road? Let's look for PlayStation's most demanding game on the platform, that is on PC. Believe it or not, it's not God of War, it's Returnal. I know, that kind of shocked me. Returnal is asking for its minimum a 1060 and it's recommended a 2070. This is very interesting. And if at any place you're saying, okay, you know what? I would love to play the same, the God of War games whenever I want to. I wonder what the next Santa Monica game will be and how they're going to possibly spec it. You basically take this into account. Look at it, it's asking for a 2060. I don't know what Returnal is smoking, but man, that game is asking for some juice. If you wanted to, you could also say, well, how about Ratchet and Clank? I mean, that was the game that needed the magic SSD, huh? Well, what is it asking for? It's asking for a 2060 and an SSD required. So your CPU, your GPU, you can basically do that. So what do? We go find a GPU that is beefier than all of the requirements. In this case, I'm getting a GPU that is better than all the requirements and also better than the GPUs or APU segment, the GPU segment of the APU of the consoles, which is an AMD RX 6750 XT. How do we know this? We know that the 6700 non-XT is the closest comparison to the PlayStation 5's GPU. And we know that the Series S and the Series X and PS5, they have similarities in their GPU counterparts. So the 6750 XT is going to have to do because AMD makes a lot of the devices actually for these two platforms. Now, this particular GPU is a 1440 capable GPU. So what we're doing is we're future-proofing for any games that they may decide, oh, we want this game to be able to run, say, a beefier GPU. We want to be able to sit pretty when that game comes out. Then we go to our CPU. In this case, I'm recommending a Ryzen 5 5500. These fit into the slot of these particular pricing, so keep that in mind. And the Ryzen 5 5500 is one that I also use. And keep in mind, I've also built this specs as well. And if you want any benchmarks, just ask in the comment section. So it's a 6-core, CPU, and it can basically handle a lot of what these games are asking for. If you're not necessarily too, versed in all of this, it's very simple. You just need to go on YouTube and look at what these CPUs are capable of doing. People will run benchmarks on your favorite games and post them on YouTube, and they'll put the frame rate, the frame data all over, and you'll be able to see how many frames per second at what resolution the game is playing. Then you need a motherboard. In this case, I'm looking at the Asus Prime B450 motherboard. It's a very popular, AM4 motherboard. Some people may swear that you need to go with the B550 or whatever it is, but you need to go with your wallet. Don't fall into the temptation of thinking every single time that, oh no, I need to buy the latest and greatest. Now, at the time I actually was doing this first build, I bought myself a mini ITX motherboard because I wanted to do like a small form factor, console-like-ish size build. So yeah, I had to buy myself a slightly more expensive motherboard, but with $69, you're Gucci. You can get yourself this motherboard and you're good to go. And I also vouch for this motherboard. I built a build for one of my kids with this particular motherboard and the same CPU. It runs him very well. He's been enjoying himself. As to the storage, a 1 terabyte storage can cost you anywhere from about $70 and even as little as about, in some cases, $50-ish. It would depend on you. It would depend on what discounts you're getting or what rebates you're getting. Leverage that to your advantage when you're going into that. Then power supply, we're looking at a 600 watt power supply at about $44. Now, this power supply got me in hot water because some really technically, or people who claim to be technically savvy came out at me and said, hey, this, power supply is too cheap. And there's a website that ranked it as an F-tier power supply. However, the funny thing these people didn't take into account is Linus Tech had already done some tests with this power supply, and it is recommended across the board. If you feel that the price is not something that you're comfortable with, then get yourself a slightly more expensive power supply because that's what you want to do. However, keep in mind that discipline is very huge to be able to nab the budget, and you can always upgrade whenever you have enough money to do that. You don't have to upgrade the whole unit like you do a console. You can upgrade any of the components that you choose to. However, like I said, this build is future-proof to take you into the next console generation without any sweat at all. Then we need to look at the RAM. RAM is very interesting because it's cheap. And there was a time where, because of the mining craze, it became expensive. So about $33, you can get yourself 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM. So this is basically how you're going to put together your PC build. This is basically what you need to be looking forward to in terms of getting a PC that can run the games that you want it to run. And this particular PC is basically sitting at a point where we know it's better than both the Series X console and the PS5 console. So that can be the way to simplify that, okay, I'll be able to run and play almost any game on here. Now in building and putting it together, these are not necessarily the hardest things to do. Some people make it seem like it's rocket science. In some cases, some people will make it seem overly complicated, but many of them are just speaking without any knowledge of what's going on. I've said it before. If you can install a light bulb, if you can put together a, jigsaw puzzle, if you can put together Lego sets to build anything, you can build a PC. It's literally plugging devices into the right slots and the right ports. There are guides, there are manuals and stuff to help you out. Shoot, if you've bought furniture from IKEA and you've put it together successfully, you can build a gaming PC. It's actually not that difficult. So I say to this, if this is something that you want to explore as the next generation of consoles are coming and you feel like, well, maybe you need to start exploring this, I say shout out to you because I think you will benefit significantly from this. Thanks so much for watching the video. I really appreciate you guys' time and audience, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.